Hello everyone, welcome to episode 1 of Title Hunt. In this series, I will be posting videos showing my journey as I try to achieve the National Master title in chess, which is acquired when you reach a USCF rating of 2200. Currently, my USCF rating is around the high 1700s, um, so there's still a long ways to go, but that's why I am trying to improve, trying to study and learn more, and I wanted to analyze my games that I play in over the board tournaments and showcase my journey here. So, uh, in this video, I will be going over 4 games that I played in a recent over the board tournament where I performed really well. Hopefully, this will help my USCF rating to go up, obviously. um, the first game I played, round 1, was against um, Nathaniel, who is rated 836. Now, when I first saw the pairing, I immediately had flashbacks to a tournament last year where my first round also I was paired against a low-rated opponent who had joined the open section. And in that tournament, I underestimated my opponent's chances in the game. I got really overconfident and I ended up blundering and losing. So I almost don't want to show this just because of how embarrassing it is, but at the same time, I also want to kind of go over uh, some of the pitfalls that you can have in your games, and also show that blunders never stop really. It happens to everybody. So this was the position. This was from, like I said, this tournament last year, and my opponent had just played knight to c6 from a5. And here I immediately just had tunnel vision into this side of the board. Um, I had just played a bunch of queen moves around this corner of the board. My knight had jumped in, so I was really focused on this corner. And I spotted a nice tactic, I thought, where this knight is only defended by this pawn on b7, right? So I thought, well, if I play knight takes b7, I'm attacking the rook, and I'm also threatening to take the now undefended knight. And after knight takes b7, king takes b7, that doesn't help because my queen now comes in, and it's check, and my queen is defended. And I pick up the knight for a pawn. And so I figured, well, look at me, how cool is this? If I was thinking, and I'm sure some of you see the reason why this is such a bad mistake, if I was thinking, I should have realized that my opponent actually has quite a lot of material that is focusing on my back rank. And I also should have realized that my king has nowhere to move forward. King can't move 2 spaces. My king has no spaces to move forward. And if I had realized that, I would have seen this move knight to c6 doesn't create a threat. There's nothing that black can take. I mean, black could take this pawn, but then I just take back, and in this position I'm up 2 pawns. So black takes the pawn, I take back, black takes my knight, I take this pawn, I'm up 2 pawns in this case, and I also have these, triple connected passed pawns. This is just going to be a totally winning game for me. If I'd realized all of that, I would have just played h3 without even thinking and gone on to win the game. But instead, I played this move, knight takes b7. And if you haven't figured out why this is such a bad move and why the evaluation is suddenly mate in 3 for black, maybe take a second to try to find it. Yeah, my opponent played queen takes c1, and immediately my heart just dropped. I was like, what did I just do? Because rook takes c1 is forced. There's nothing else that I can do. My king is stuck on the back rank. And this knight move that I thought was so brilliant, right? Sacrificing the knight to weaken this knight, it actually just opened up both rooks to team up together now. And so rook to d1, rook takes d1 is forced, and the rook delivers checkmate on the back rank. And this was maybe the most humiliating chess experience I've had. Everyone was talking about the upset. Oh wow, the 1700 lost to an 800. It was rough. I immediately went and watched some YouTube videos about grandmasters blundering because I figured that was the only way to bounce back from that. And I ended up winning the rest of my games in the tournament, thankfully. So I was able to come back from it, but it was a very big learning experience. So coming back to this recent tournament, I really did not want to have that happen with my first opponent, another 800 in this case. Um, but it actually ended up being a more scary game than I would have preferred. My opponent played e4, and if you've seen, I guess I probably only have a few videos out at this point, but if you've seen any of them, you know what my response is: the Scandinavian defense with d5. And here my opponent immediately makes an inaccuracy. Most people will take this pawn on d5 and lure the queen out because it allows you to attack it with a tempo. So here that's what this would look like. After pawn takes, queen takes, the knight can come to c3, and that develops the knight with a tempo. But the whole point of the Scandinavian is you bring the queen to the side, and you basically say the queen is mostly safe, at least safe for the time being. And if she ever becomes threatened, I can just push my c pawn up and drop her back to c7. I like the Scandinavian because it creates lots of solid pawn structures with black, and just allows you to kind of turtle in a little bit and withstand lots of attacks. So um, that's the main line. My opponent, however, pushed this pawn to e5, and this just allows me to get a favorable position after bishop to f5. Favorable meaning, the engine will say it's about equal, but uh, the fact that black can equalize on move 2 is already a victory for black. That's kind of the whole point. You're down a move from the beginning of the game, so equalizing is a great thing to do. And the reason why this is a good position is after white plays the natural d4 and I strengthen the center a little bit and also my pawn with e6. Uh, you'll notice this pawn structure is actually the exact same as the French defense. So the French defense here is after e4, black plays e6, and in the advanced French, white will push this pawn up to e5, and you see the pawn structure is where is this? Pawn structure is exactly the same, right? But the difference is this bishop is out here. And the reason why this is such a good deal for black is there's actually a saying in the French called the French bishop, because this bishop on c8 usually has a hard time getting into the game because of these pawns on the light squares. So the fact that this bishop is able to be outside of the pawn chain, kind of drop back if needed, put pressure on this pawn, it's just a better position for black, in my opinion. At least easier to play. The one downside, though, is that this light square diagonal is very weak, so you have to be careful about this bishop check, which actually comes in play later in this game. So my opponent develops the knight out. Now this also is a slight inaccuracy, I think. I would prefer, if I was playing white, to strengthen this d4 pawn with a pawn. Now, moving the knight to c3 prevents that by virtue of the fact that the knight is on this square and you can't push the pawn onto the knight. You can't take your own pieces. I don't know if you knew that, but if you didn't, I don't know. Now this position, I figured I might as well try to undermine this center the white has. Whenever your opponent has a pawn chain and you want to try to target it, usually the best method to do that is to hit it at the weakest point, which is the back of the chain, because obviously this pawn is defending this pawn, but this pawn has no pawn defenders. Once again, this knight moved to c3 kind of prevented this pawn from being defended by a pawn. Anyways, my opponent defends it, and I put more pressure on it with my knight, developing. Opponent just defends it again with a bishop, and I actually decided to take here. Now, it's not the best move according to the engine, but the best move is actually bishop to g4, which I don't know. I think I would just have to have another level of understanding of chess to be able to play this move. Usually in the opening, you don't want to make the same, you don't want to move the same piece more than once. Usually, that's a general rule. Obviously here that doesn't apply, but I don't think I would find this in an over-the-board game even if I had, I don't know, an hour. That's actually something important that I forgot to mention. The games were 25 minutes per side with a 5-second increment, so you gained 5 seconds every time you moved. So there's more time than a general online rapid game, but still not a whole lot to think about every move. So here I just took, and white recaptured with the knight, uh, and I dropped my bishop back. I didn't like taking, because I thought after bishop takes, I just was really scared of this check actually. Now the funny thing is, I mean, I can just develop my knight to e7, and then if this check happens, then just block with the knight. Or something else I can do is just push a6. And there's not really anything that white has here along this diagonal. So, but I was scared of that and just dropped my bishop back. I definitely, in positions like this, like you definitely do not want white to be able to, look at this. Isn't that crazy? I mean, in this case, white takes, if you take back, this pawn is hanging. But even if this pawn wasn't hanging, you just never want to allow your opponent to take a bishop with a knight and damage your pawn structure. That's usually not a good deal for you. So that's why I dropped the bishop back. And now comes the stressful part. My opponent pins the knight. Now here I wasn't too scared right now. Obviously, if I don't do anything about this threat, white will play knight takes, and after pawn takes knight, this bishop will take the pawn and actually force the king to move, losing castling rights, and then take this rook. And white is very up material. And actually, let's see. Oh, here, here it's even worse. Yeah, it's even worse because of the position of my king. White actually has this move, and look at that. The king has no moves, and the queen is forced to block. And I mean, it's already completely lost. So the point is, yeah, you definitely need to defend this this knight. So I did it. I did it by moving knight g to e7, and my opponent promptly pinned that knight as well. So now I have two pinned knights. Now this one is called an absolute pin because the chess.com at least will not even allow you to move this knight because it's an illegal move, right? You can't move a piece and then allow your opponent to take your king. This one is not an absolute pin because I technically can still move it. It's just a very bad move at the moment because I would lose my queen. But there are some positions where you can, sacrifice if you have a mate or something. Not the case here. So I figured, well, I'll step out of the pin and also strengthen this knight a little bit by moving my queen to c7. My opponent now moves queen to d2, and immediately I saw, well, I think this just hangs this pawn. So I snatched it, might as well, king's in check. So it's basically a free move, right, when you give a check. And my opponent blocked with the knight. And here I'm glad that I realized that my queen is kind of misplaced here in the center. My opponent can easily attack her with bishop to f4, for example, and I just was like, I just had a feeling that she belonged kind of tucked back here. And I guess you can't really see, I don't think I cropped this part out, but the only two good moves in this position are queen to c7 and queen to d6. So I'm glad I realized that, and I moved my queen back to c7. My opponent moved queen to c3, and already I was kind of just fantasizing about moving my bishop to b4. Unfortunately, that doesn't work right now for two reasons. First of all, this knight is in the way, and bishops can't jump over knights, unfortunately. And also, this knight is pinned. So even if this knight wasn't here, this would not be a pin of the queen. In this case, this would just be me hanging a bishop because I can't recapture the queen because this knight's pinned. So, but I just kept that in the back of my mind, something to be aware of. So I brought my rook to defend again, right? White was attacking it 3 times, and my opponent moved bishop to f4. And here's where I started kind of getting scared. Because already I'm thinking this opponent, this 836, is playing way better than an 836 should be playing. So I'm already thinking he's probably way underrated, and just what if I draw? What if I lose this game? That would be terrible. Now, here I actually found the best move, But then I played it, and he played his response, and I thought that I had blundered. So I found that e5 is the best move. And at first I just thought it's a fork, right? I was like, oh, I just forked him. Like, that's simple. He's gonna move the bishop away. I'm gonna take the knight, and it actually just attacks the queen as well. Like, I'm doing great. Right? Like, because I was thinking, so if bishop g3, I can take this knight, and if he takes my queen, I just take his queen, right? And now I'm actually threatening this pawn and also his bishop, so that would be really bad for him. Um, but I totally missed that he can just take my knight on c6 with his knight. And now this is just a crazy position. Obviously, I cannot take this bishop because he has this discovered attack, discovered check on my king. Knight takes a7. I mean, I just can't block with anything really. If I block with the knight, I mean, now my pawns are all weak. Computer says just castle queenside for white, and yeah, that makes sense. Just there's nothing I can do really here. So I was like, oh boy, did I just blunder? The crazy thing is, so I looked at pawn takes b6, sorry, b takes c6, but I ended up not going for it. I honestly can't remember why. Um, the funny thing is, it's the only good move in the position. However, I think this is why I rejected it, because the only good response after bishop takes e5 is this crazy move. I don't know. I doubt I could see this move if you gave me half an hour to analyze this position. Maybe I would. Maybe I would. It's just a crazy position. There's there's this queen is hanging. The bishop is hanging. This pawn is hanging, and the queen gets in here in that case. It's just there's so much stuff going on. And here, the best move for black. It's a negative 2.6 advantage. Everything else is zeros. Is d4. I I mean, this pawn is just immortal. Like, you can take it three different ways, but nothing is good. So if bishop takes, well, that's simple. You just take this bishop, and I'm up a bishop for a pawn. If knight takes, this disconnects the queen and the bishop. So now this bishop is undefended, and I can take it with check. And after something like bishop e2, well, now I'm just bringing my knight, and this is a great position for me. I'm going to bring my bishop. Not there. Slid the wrong way. There we go. So obviously, knight takes is not going to do it. And if queen takes, then once again, only move queen a5 check. After the knight blocks, now I'm free to take this bishop finally. Even though my king is kind of wide open, no pawns around him, there's just nothing white can do apparently. What about, like, if takes... Oh, right. Um, oh, sorry. I think something... Okay. Looks like my light ran out of batteries, but we got that fixed. So, what I was going over here, if I'm remembering right, is that I had this crazy resource after b takes c6, where I can play d4. Like I said, I mean, it's just, wow, what a great move. However, I didn't see that, and so I took with the knight, and unfortunately this loses all advantage to bishop takes e5. Um, Now, got my queen out of the way of the bishop. But here I was scared about this. Currently, white can't take this pawn on g7 because I can actually take this bishop. And if white continues just taking, well, now I get this pin. And now it works because my knight's not pinned and my bishop's defended. So currently this doesn't work, but I was worried about that sometime in the future. So white moved the knight, and this was an annoying move because it defends the bishop, adds more pressure to this knight, and I just wasn't sure what to do. So here, the computer actually gives king to d8, which is, that's a cool move. The whole idea is that you're getting out of the way of this pin. So now bishop to b4, pinning the queen, is actually a threat. Now you're also threatening this bishop as well. and you are effectively threatening the b5 bishop. Not with that. I didn't mean to draw that arrow. The way that what I mean by that is if white was to castle, for example, you can play knight takes e5, and then after queen takes, you can take the bishop, right? So you remove the defender of the bishop, and then you can take it. Um, so that would have been a cool move to spot. And after takes, the bishop can't move because then I get this pin. So I wish I would have seen that king to d8. Just kind of, I mean, that's just scary though. And another thing too is that at this point in the game, I was down to probably about 4 minutes. Now I gained 5 seconds every time I move, but I was scared that I was going to get into a position that was complicated and not be able to calculate everything in time. So I figured like right here, knight to d4. I was like, I'll just move bishop to c5, right? And that is an okay move according to the engine. Here, yeah, white took, and I recaptured with the pawn, obviously, and then white castled. And here, I should have just castled. I think I was thinking something like this, but wow, bishop b4. Oh wait, sorry, not here, not this position, because the knight, yeah, the knight is blocking the queen and the bishop. But I was just kind of worried about castling into this potentially, right? Um, like here, the computer gives knight to b3. Now I can, okay, I guess that's the key move, is that I'm able to attack this queen and get it off of this diagonal so that this bishop's not actually threatening to take on g7. So, yeah, I should have castled, but I ended up just pushing f6, trying to kick this bishop away. For a second, I thought, well, did I win a piece? Because if the bishop like goes back, then I could take this knight, and I looked to be doing pretty good. But man, this game was just full of like in between moves. Like earlier, I had that fork, or so I thought. Right, I pushed pawn to e5, and I thought I was forking the bishop and the knight. Nope, and the knight. But then the knight was able to, I think, take either here or here. I can't remember. But anyways, once again, in between move, my opponent plays knight to b3. Now, I saw this move after I played f6. I should have been able to calculate it as I played it or before, but like I said, I was low on time, so I didn't really have the, the leisure to do that. um, but right here, I did calculate. Oh, if knight to b6, sorry b3, um, I was like, well, I think I can play this bishop to b4, and I'm threatening the bishop. I'm threatening the queen. It seems to be doing okay for me. Um, Now, I was actually much more worried about knight to e6, and this would be a much better move, because this threatens the bishop like knight to b3, but then it also threatens like pawn g7. Like the only move that I have to survive is bishop to e7, and I don't know if I would have found that. I think I would have. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I would have done, but luckily my opponent this was maybe the only time in this game where I felt like he actually played like an 800. He moved his knight to b3, and I let out a sigh of relief. I'm like, okay, I think I'm better here because I can play bishop to b4. And like I was showing, now I'm attacking this queen, and I'm attacking the bishop. Once again, though, in between move. Now, it's not actually a good move in this position, but um, I kind of was annoyed by this as well at first because I was like, man, I thought I was going to win this bishop. Now, white has created this threat on my queen, so that if I take, white just recaptures. But then I started calculating that line because I went well, this here is the most forcing move in the position, right? What I mean by that is like, you know, say that white, I don't know, like say that white instead, um, I mean, say I don't know. I want to try to set up a hypothetical position. Say the position was more like this, hypothetically. Um, you know, a move like a5 is not exactly forcing. It doesn't threaten anything, right? I mean, maybe I'm thinking about pushing a5 in the future, but it's not even that big of a deal. Then I will just move away. So the point is, like, that's not a very forceful move, right? It doesn't require a response from the opponent. This move, however, bishop takes c3 is the most forceful move in this position because um, white is forced to recapture my queen, or else white's down a queen. So I started calculating here, right? Bishop takes queen. And here, rather than taking the pawn on b2, which maybe looks natural, but I don't know. I wasn't sure about that. And I guess it kind of ends up being about the same. So I wonder what the computer says about this. Rather than taking on b2, I calculated so bishop takes queen, bishop takes queen, and then capture the bishop. Because I thought that's also a forcing move in that it kind of requires white to recapture my bishop, or else he'd be down material. And then all I saw in that position, I didn't even really at first think about this bishop on g6 being able to take the pawn. All I saw is that, okay, so my pawns would be here, here, and here, and white's pawns would be here, here, and here. And I thought, I think I should be able to win this endgame, right? I have two main pawn islands, right? These two groups of pawns that are next to each other that can defend each other. White has three, right? In that hypothetical position. Plus I have a bishop, which is generally considered better than a knight in the endgame. And then as I calculated that, I went, oh, and I can pick up the pawn on c2, so I'd be up a pawn too. So I'm like, okay, up a pawn. White has worse pawns than me, worse minor piece, and my king is not in danger, right? Anything else allowing the queen to stand the board means that my king is going to be in a lot more danger potentially. And at this point, I had like a minute and a half, so I'm like, okay, I could push like c5, which is another top line of the computer. Not the greatest, but it's still winning for black. The problem is that it gets really complicated after queen h3, and I mean, talk about in between moves this game. Like there was a potential for this as well, right? Um, Also, what I mean by in between move is right. I move this pawn up, attacking the bishop, and most people might be like, oh well, uh, you know I've got to move the bishop or move the queen. And then, oh, this is too bad. Like, I'll move the queen, and then black will just take my bishop because two things are under attack at once, right? But an in between move is saying, well, I'm going to make a move that creates a threat of my own. So, I'll move my queen here. Now my queen is out of danger. Black has to respond to this by, castling, and now I can get my bishop out. Funny actually though. Yeah. Anyways, this gets into some deeper lines, but like I said, I was not willing to calculate all that out with a minute remaining on the clock. I figured simplest way is just to take. And here, uh, I was thinking, I'm gonna bring my king up. It's gonna be fine. So takes, 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 just like I was talking about this pawn structure, and then also I was able to pick up the pawn. And then white gave this check. Of course, you want to move the king closer to the center usually, um, as long as there's not some tactic. King to f7 is just a little weaker. There's not as many pawns over here, not as many things that I can do with my king. In the end game, once a lot of pieces are traded off, you can actually use your king, right? White only has, the two rooks and the knight. I only have the two rooks and the bishop. So once there's not a whole lot of pieces, your king is less likely to get checkmated and can be used as a strong piece in the end game. Um, and here I was like, well, this is kind of an outpost for the knight at the moment. I could kick it away if I need to, but it's not that threatening, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot of dangerous squares around here. I'll just slide the bishop back. Um, and this was something about the position that I calculated after all those trades, right? Is I also realized that white does not have a passed pawn in this position, which is an important note. If, for example, my b pawn were here or here, then this a pawn might actually be kind of a problem. Now, it's not really that big of a problem because I have both my rooks defending. My bishop can defend as well, but it's just more. It gives the opponent more chances to come back. Um, Now here I figured rook trade is probably a good choice. Something else is if you're winning in an endgame with two rooks for both sides, right? So four rooks on the board. It's a good idea to try to trade off one pair of rooks. Uh, just with two rooks, the person defending is able to coordinate their rooks. If they're able to coordinate their rooks better than you, they can get to a position where, you know, they're actually getting some compensation and some counterplay with the rooks. Trading off one pair makes it so that it's much harder to make a comeback. My opponent took, which I was really happy to see. Like I said, I was really expecting this move, just attacking my bishop, applying some pressure onto this file that has my king on it. But I mean, after the trade, it was like, okay, this game is almost over. Of course, I take with the rook, keeping my king in the central position. Um, my opponent creates a lift for his king, like I should have done in that game last year, which is it's a nice move, especially now that he only has one rook on this file. Um, in this position, his rook is tied down to the defense of the back rank, which means this pawn is not actually defended. Um, and so by creating a lift for the king, so that any sort of rook check can be just fled to on h2, means that this rook can now move freely anywhere that it's able to move, of course. So I put my rook in front of this pawn. My opponent pushed it though, and here I just decided I'll take. Um, Even though white is able to play this knight to b3 move, which is a tricky move, of course, if you just kind of, I don't know, auto snap a4, well, it's actually not as bad as I thought it would be, which is kind of funny. I guess it's just because I'm up 2 pawns, but white has this fork, actually. It's a triple fork, funny enough, forking the pawn, the bishop, and the king. And so, obviously, this is much worse um, position than this. Um, so, I just was like, well, I'll just bring my king forward to d6, stopping any sort of knight checks and knight forward movement. Black took the pawn. Um, and here, yeah, I actually got the idea to try to trade off the last rook. Because I also figured that if we were to get to a minor piece endgame, I'm up a pawn, which is a bonus, like I said. In a lot of cases, the bishop can also dominate the knight. For example, like um, if if the bishop was here, right, and this pawn wasn't here, so if the bishop is, I guess that's like 3 squares away from a knight that's on the edge of the board, then the bishop is just completely dominating the knight's movement. As you can see, right, the only 4 squares the knight have would be covered by the bishop. There's positions like that, which just goes to show why the bishops are usually considered to be stronger, especially in endgames when the board is all open. Um, my opponent attacked my bishop, and without even thinking, I mean, I like I said, I was down to under a minute at this point, so playing fast means that I gain more time. So without even pausing, I played rook to b1, um, just forcing a trade of some pieces. And my opponent gave this check, and you know, I was like, you know what? I actually think that the rook endgame is also winning. If I take this knight and allow my bishop to be taken, I was like, I'm up a pawn. Um, my king is a lot more active, and especially after this move, which I I do like that I found this quick. Obviously, White's plan to try to hold on to this position is to bring the king to the center as fast as possible, um, which involves some sort of path, either pushing f3 and then, like I just showed, this king walking in through here, or maybe king f1, king e2, and the king is just more active. Um, so what I wanted to do is give this check, right? Because what this does is it forces the king backwards to h2, and this is just not the direction that the king wants to go in this endgame. Now, this side of the board is even more just kind of isolated from the opponent's king, I guess. Like I said, in the end game, especially with just rooks and pawns, the kings are much more powerful than in the middle game, for example. Um, so I move my king closer to put some pressure on the white's position here. White just started attacking this pawn chain, but the nice thing is I can just advance, and now all of these pawns are defended. I mean, except for h7, but it's going to take multiple moves to attack it. And even if white does try to do that, I can just drop the rook back to b7. It might not even be necessary in some positions, but something about endgames too is sometimes it's better to play moves that just prevent all sorts of counterplay from your opponent, right? In this position, the only way that white can create any sort of chance to draw or potentially win is if white is able to take, all of my pawns over here and start pushing like the h pawn. Um, so anyways, I pushes g4, and I figured, um, the more, I guess, like, it, I don't know. I wasn't sure what what exactly to do here, but I figured um, I'll take because like I could play king to c4, and after takes. This is obviously winning, but like I said before, I just didn't really like the fact that white got this passed pawn. I mean, obviously it's not enough at all, because my pawn is much faster, my rook is better placed, my king is much better placed, and I have two pawns over here compared to one right here. So obviously this is still winning, but I figured, especially with low time, I just don't want to allow any of that. I'm just going to take. Oh, whoops. Ugh, that always happens. I accidentally hit the wrong key, and now it goes to the beginning of the game. Let me find where I was, right about here. Okay, so I figured I'll just take, and after takes, now there's no passed pawn, and it's going to take longer for white to try to generate counterplay. So I'm moving my king up, and I think white was just trying to get out of the way of this pawn. Like I said, it's kind of the only chance that white has, right? Some sort of yeah, f4, f5, and then after g takes f5, white has this passed g pawn. That's the only hope that white has, really. Which is why I actually stopped and decided to play g5. And it is actually one of the top moves of the computer. Like I said, pretty much everything is winning here, except for like rook h1. um, but this is just a nice move. Um, I can't remember what the term is for it, but there's some term for a pawn in an endgame that just freezes multiple pawns. So, like, what I mean by that is if I don't do this, white can push, like I said, f4, f5, and create this passed pawn. When I push g5, now if white tries to go for some sort of breakthrough, well, I just take, and this pawn isn't passed, right? There's still this h7 pawn that's stopping its progression towards promotion. So, anyways, this g5 move, I just liked it a lot to prevent any sort of like funny business that my opponent might try. Um, anyways, opponent plays rook to h3, obviously targeting this pawn, and I mean, like I said, not super necessary, but I just was really safe. I was so scared I was gonna throw this game like that game from last year. So I just played rook to b7, defending everything. My opponent attacked my pawn on c6, so I pushed it up. Then attacks the pawn on g5, and I figured, you know what? I don't actually really need this pawn. If I wanted to be extra safe, I could even, go rook to g7, just saying you're not taking either of these pawns. You're never getting anything, any passed pawns or anything like that. But I figured, you know what? I'll just take this pawn. Now I have two connected passed pawns, and they're very fast. Rook takes g5, um, and now I played king to d4, uh, defending both of the pawns and also preparing to push the c pawn. Um, if I push the d4 right away, wow, look at that! It's already a draw after rook takes c4, rook takes c5 check. So that's really important to be careful to not blunder things like this, right? Um, and yeah, in a lot of cases, I actually want to push my c pawn because it's a little bit farther away from this king, right? So this is just kind of a nice move to defend everything, keep everything solid. Opponent tries to bring the king, but then I just started pushing the c pawn, and it was too late. I got a queen, and of course the rest is pretty simple, and I checkmated my opponent. So that was a good first round. Um, like I said, I was really surprised by my opponent's play. I felt like he played more like a 1500, 1600 even. Um, I yeah. In fact, he ended up getting second place in the tournament and beating a couple of high rated players. So he was definitely underrated. But I'm glad I was able to kind of keep my nerves together and perform well, um, even though I was, nearly 1,000 points higher than him. I was able to learn from last year and not make those same mistakes again. Well, anyways, thank you all for tuning into this first episode. Um, in future episodes, I'll be going over some of the other games that I played. There's some pretty fun ones, so keep your eyes out for that. And I think that's it. Have a nice day.